Hi, hello and welcome to the Business and Banking Dialogue Show, our bi-weekly show, which comes to you every Wednesday and Friday. So today we have a very good topic that's coming up. It's on the budget, a once in a lifetime budget or once in a century budget, as the uh, finance minister has said. So once again, welcome to the Business and Banking Dialogue Show. We are live across EPS channels, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Today, uh, 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 KK, I'm the moderator, and thank you for participating in today's show. So, ladies and gentlemen, there is a drop in the rate of GDP, as you all know. Contraction in the second year at 7.5 from 23.9% in the first quarter, with the revival of economy showing some green shoots in certain sectors. FDI equity inflows have been around 30 billion during the fiscal year. The stock market has hit all-time high. Okay, in this pandemic, it has hit an all-time high. Most financial experts believe that the rupee will not depreciate further. The GDP predictions for FY 2021, as you must have seen in today's television channels, is expected to be at 7.7%, minus 7.7, a recovery from minus 23%, which is largely due to the pandemic. The budget for the forthcoming financial year will be announced, and the finance minister has gone on record to say it will be once in a century budget in the midst of a once in a century pandemic. So, what can we expect? That's the question. What can we expect? What do we want to revive the economy? What does the industry want? What do financial institutions need? So, there are a whole lot of questions that I'm sure you're all thinking about as to what the budget is going to be like. So let's hear today from Mr. Jaspal Bindra. Good evening, Mr. Bindra, and welcome to the show. Mr. Bindra, good evening. You're on mute.
KK.
Yeah, hi. Welcome to the show, Mr. Bindra. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bindra has come to our show before. Briefly, let me give you his career and his profile. So briefly about Mr. Bindra, after graduating from XLRI, Jamshedpur, Jaspal Bindra joined the Bank of America, where he spent 10 years. He later on joined Stanchart in August 1998, where he remained for 17 years and rose to the coveted position of CEO of the Standard Chartered Bank, as it is fully as a full form of Stanchart. So, let's, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Mr. Bindra. And so, Mr. Bindra, we met, last during the thick of pandemic, right? We were like caught in the middle of COVID. So since then to today, how's business activities since we last met, since you're heading an NBFC?
So clearly, things have improved gradually over the last, in fact, all through the second half of the calendar year. Things have shown a gradual improvement month on month, across many sectors, but definitely ours as well. And a welcome, but we still have some more road to go.
Okay, that's good to hear. So at least we are seeing signs of recovery. That's the message. Mr. Bindra, the Indian finance minister, Nirmala Sitharaman, while talking to CII Virtual Summit, created a huge curiosity around the union budget of 21-22, when she told the country's corporate, send me your input so that we can see a budget which is a budget like never before, in a way. The budget which is to be presented on Feb 1 in the Parliament is indeed being drafted in the perhaps in the never before. The finance minister claims that the budget 2020 would be once in a century budget. Is it a hyperbole, or do you see finance minister unveiling big and bold measures?
Okay, so let me give a little text to this. Whenever great expectations are created, it is a big challenge. The same great created stimuli package at the start of the pandemic. Clearly, there was a lot of with supply, not because it's bad package, but it felt promising that one such a large expectation, however well you do, it is always going to be compared with something that's better, and that's just and that's the real world. So I wish that the finance the budget rather promise budget of the in a matter of speech.
Mr. Bindra, can you just check your audio? It's breaking in between.
Oh, sorry. Is the sound a problem?
Yeah, sound a problem.
Okay. I hope it's not the. It's not.
Yeah, now it's better. Now it's better. Now it's better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think that is the real challenge. That once you set a very great expectation, then however when you deliver, you're always compared to something that could have been better.
Yeah.
And and that is an infinite sort of expectation. So yes, we do hope that there is basis for a very good budget this year. And I say that because, at the back of a crisis, there is always a much stronger buy-in, even for difficult reforms or some challenging aspects of the budget making that get announced, whether it's tax, whether it's investments, etc.
Yeah.
We had the same situation the last time around of this kind of severity on an economic front in the early 90s. And that was the sort of pathway to be able to deliver a very strong budget, which we still refer to as the best budget that happened, or a very timely reform budget that happened in those years. I think with what we've experienced through 2020, we have again the grounds for being able to justify a transformational budget. Actually, the budget can go two ways, is my expectation. If we look at 2020, actually, it's been quite an extraordinary year because we had the first half of the year, which was really doomsday kind of situation for most people. And then, fortunately, the second half of 2020 has been far more encouraging across most sectors, and the sentiment has also been quite positive. And as we step into 2021, there are several green shoots which are very promising. If we look at the announcement on the vaccines, that in itself is a very strong positive. If we look at the digital reach that people have worked on in the last few months, that is giving fruit. But even when we look at more tangible things, there is quite a lot of positive. Whether you look at the GST collection, whether you look at the auto sales, whether you look at the growth in some of the other businesses which are happening, the commodity prices, etc. So there is clearly that positivity. So now basically we could have a budget which either just sustains this momentum, which in other words is that they don't create a dampener in any sort, which takes the sentiment away from where it is today. And that would be a nice budget, but it won't be a great budget. But at least it will hopefully maintain the momentum. Of course, the other is that it's a transformational budget, and it actually builds on what all the momentum we already have and takes it to a new place from here. I don't know which she will offer, but clearly there is scope for at minimum a good budget to a very good budget.
Excellent. So will it address some of the sectors that are, about 17 sectors out of the 21 sectors are not doing well, typically hospitality and perhaps reality and others. So you think there's going to be a sector-focused budget?
So I think the budget, to be positive all around, will probably have four different pillars which will have to be addressed. First and foremost, it should be market friendly. So to the extent that it keeps the sentiment and confidence strong, it has to be market friendly. The second is it should be tax friendly, because the more disposable income people have, the more likely they are to feel good about the budget. The third is it should be investment friendly, because the one thing that the country is clearly short of is capital, be it foreign or domestic, government or private. So clearly being an investment friendly would be the third pillar. And the fourth is sectoral support, which might be customized in the areas you mentioned: reality, hospitality, exports, aviation, all the ones that are troubled and more. So I think it has to score above average on all four to be a good budget. But at least it must be a multi-bagger on one or two of these to be a exciting budget.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's going to be tough. This is not a budget like a normal year. This is a budget within a pandemic, and there's so much to do and to kickstart the economy, revive the economy. At the same time, we should be worried about the budget deficit. Okay, would it be fair to expect a budget deficit like never before that could ease up on spending in the months ahead to provide that kind of stimulus to grow the economy?
Yeah, I feel, KK, that at this point, people are going to be less concerned with the budget deficit, as long as we can direct the spending in the right places. And I'm including in that the global rating agencies as well. For the simple reason that not because India suddenly has a special need and is able to justify the deficit. Actually, globally, all the governments have gone into deficit spending. So there is a kind of a relative situation which will make it difficult for them to just pick on one country and say, hey, this is bad, you can't go on deficit spending. Whereas the rest of the world can, and we are not altering their ratings, but we definitely want to alter yours. So I feel that there is a mob benefit we have now, other than the genuine need as well, because we are under-resourced in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capital investments, etc. So there could be a case for India or for many emerging markets alone. But when you have the mob of the OECD markets also doing the same thing, it's an easier decision from an economic point of view for the government to take.
Yeah. So according to your budget deficit at this moment of time, because of the pandemic that is on, we need to go out, we need to think out of the box, go out of the way, and not worry about deficit, and create a budget that's going to kickstart the economy. Is that what you?
That is right. That is right. I think it is far more, because the one issue that has come up repeatedly is that there is a demand side problem. It is not necessarily only a supply side problem. It's a demand side problem. And the demand side problem can necessarily has to come from creating jobs, creating demand. And, unless we do that, it's not going to happen.
Okay. So, I'm sure, the finance minister has the best of intention to kickstart. And I think everyone would want to support that industry, people, everybody. But I'm sure there are going to be roadblocks. Okay. So, what are the roadblocks that needs to be dislodged immediately if India has to pull itself out of this morass of degeneration in the aftermath of COVID-19?
So I think the other than bringing some sectors back to life,
Yeah.
the ones that you mentioned earlier, I think the major problems, the major kickstart is going to be no different pre-COVID as post-COVID, because I think it is still the land and labor reforms, which are the two big challenges, and
Yeah.
trying to solve for the ease of doing business. I mean, if we make that easier, then that is hopefully going to help. Um, we grew up, the country was only less than 100 years ago a colony. And when we were a colony of the British, the government's role was to protect the state.
Mm.
And unfortunately, the bureaucracy that got installed post-independence has continued that role of protecting the states versus serving the society. And I
Yeah.
think the sooner we change that mindset from protecting the state to changing to move towards serving the society, whether it is in land or it's in labor or it's in ease of doing business, I think that is a critical milestone we have to cross.
Yeah, but Mr. Bindra, these are like major reforms, right? And already one of the reforms on the farm bills is we are hit a roadblock already, right? And there's so much of opposition. There's always be an opposition for anything that you do. So you think with the kind of roadblock that has come up, you think it's going to be more challenging to overcome the reform measures that you spoke about?
Yeah, so I think talking specifically of the farm bill, since that's a topical subject right now,
Yeah,
really the issue in the farm bill is not about politics. I mean, there is all of that as well. There is politics, there is security, there is farmers' issue, all of that stuff. There is the government's ego maybe in the way, etc. But actually, it's an entitlement versus good economics. And what typically happens is not unique to India. It happens in all democracies. To please the vote bank,
yeah,
entitlements gradually creep in, and they gradually keep getting bigger and more significant over time. And given that such a large part of the vote bank is rural in India, uh, these entitlements were given, zero tax, fertilizer subsidy, minimum sale price. All of these were provided more from vote politics than from economic consideration. And the result is that they are tough to withdraw. Once entitlements are given, it
yeah,
applies to each of us. What we get used to, either through our employers or wherever else, it is impossible to then expect anything less.
yeah,
But these, the result of these entitlements is that now Food Corporation of India for the last couple of decades is carrying surplus grains uh, of a huge quantity, which are being lost to pests and rodents and leakage and weather and all of that stuff. But they have no choice. They have to keep putting up with that. But it is not a sustainable economic proposition to continue
mm,
just storing surplus, which is never going to, feed anyone. But it has to
yeah,
be bought because otherwise you will lose the vote bank of the farmer.
yeah,
And so that is the problem. It's really, if you have to have good economics, you have to buy only as much as the demand um, consumption is met with, and not everything that is produced.
yeah,
But there was an application for MSP at a time when we were short of
Short of.
being able to grow as much grain as was required within the country. Since that has changed now, we have a different problem. But it's not an easy challenge because, as I said, you can't withdraw entitlements. In fact, in every country, even in OECD countries, there is a very strong, in fact, a very generous entitlement program for agriculture. But there it is less for vote bank. There it is because farming and creating the right ecology for those countries is not a good, is not a very attractive or appealing option for the citizens of those countries. They all want to be preferably living in urban. So to keep people away from urban and to have the ecology right, to rear sheep and cows and all of that stuff, they incentivize people who take to agriculture. In our case, it is more because we don't have the urban infrastructure, and there is a very large illiterate, unskilled workforce, which has only grown up doing tilling the land. We have to keep them there, otherwise there's no option to house them elsewhere. Otherwise we'll have other challenges elsewhere. So I think so these are all big problems. They can't be solved. So I agree with you, KK. It's a very big problem, but it has to be chiseled away. And somewhere we have to start making changes. Clearly, they have to be done in also these changes that are being made and suggested even in the farmers' bill have to be done with huge amount of consultation, buy-in, and that's why done gradually. And they are difficult to force as strongly as one would like for economic reasons. So that's the entire art and skill of getting that done. But over a period of time, that is the need of the place, the land and the labor reforms.
Okay. Yeah, I think well said, Mr. Bindra. And just, that gave us a good, I'm sure audience got a good view of the farm bills also and what's the real intention and out there. So, so it also means that we have a challenge coming for our new reforms bills. There will always be some section of the population which will not be happy. So how are we going to deal with that in a democracy? It will be very interesting to watch and see how the government goes about it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I will be winding up the show about 10 or 5 minutes earlier because Mr. Bindra has got other engagements. So I would request you to put in your questions at the earliest and in the Q&A box. If you wish to talk to Mr. Bindra directly, you could do that also. Raise your hand and the digital team will take you across and enable you basically to ask the question to Mr. Bindra directly. So I'll look forward to your questions. Please do send it as early as possible. Like I said, I'm going to close this session about 10 minutes earlier than normal as Mr. Bindra has other engagements. So, Mr. Bindra, the limited success in credit disbursement, the industry remains a cause of concern. What should the finance minister do to address this aspect, which has been highlighted by all the world rating agencies?
Sorry, KK, I missed a bit of what is it that you said has been highlighted by rating agencies?
Okay, I'll just reiterate the question.
Yeah.
The limited success in credit disbursement, credit from the finance industry to the other industries remains a cause of concern. What would the FM do to address this aspect, which has been highlighted even by the rating agencies?
Correct. So I think first of all we should all be very clear that in the near term, growth is going to come only if there is sufficient credit available in the market. If there isn't sufficient credit, I mean, in India, we have two problems. We have insufficient capital, and then we have insufficient credit on top of that. So clearly, the equity markets booming to record levels is helping the capital to some extent. And the generous FII flows and FDI flows is also helping capital to some extent. So hopefully, if this trend continues, then capital may be a diminishing problem going forward. But the credit remains a big problem because the debt markets in India are very shallow, and the banking market is in a state of uh, is very shy of extending exposure for reasons of their own, the mislending, etc., of the past, and the concerns about the current and future, etc. So I feel that the finance minister will have to find a mechanism to address that. The issue really is on the supply side. There is significant demand for credit, but the supply side is short. And I feel that the RBI's openness to find more banks and to create banks of bigger scale are both in the right direction. So far we've had in the last 40 years less than 10 new universal bank licenses. For a country that is so large, it is so underbanked and is growing at such a fast pace, both in terms of population and in terms of economic size. That just defies all logic, that you will give 6 7 universal banking licenses over a 30 40 year period. But that is the reality. And so I feel that the new proposal that is on the table now and is being debated, where more licenses can be issued in various categories, in small finance banks, in payments banks, in the universal banks, SFBs being able to convert into universal banks over a period of time, cooperatives being able to convert into SFBs with certain conditions. Big NBFCs being allowed to convert into universal banks, family conglomerates, business conglomerates being able to convert into universal. I think all of this is very positive because you need to bring in the supply side. And, then we need deep-pocketed players who can come into the business and expand the supply side. So that will clearly be... it's only when that happens, when there is enough supply side, is that banks will start looking at the bottom of the pyramid. There was a long time, even in my career, over the last 30 odd years, when the banks in the first part of that career phase, first 10 15 years, only wanted to do wholesale clients, didn't want to bother with retail. Then because of all the challenges with the wholesale banking and all the issues, suddenly the retail banking became even more appealing than wholesale. And the last 10 15 years, people have been far more excited about retail. But they want to do retail, which is at the upper end, the top 2 to 3 to 5% of countries' retail. And nobody wants to do the bottom of the pyramid. But I think as the supply side will increase, as the challenges in the top end retail will also start emerging over time, as we've already seen with subprime and other issues around in the world, then there will be a little bit more appetite for the lower end, of the pyramid, and that will hopefully solve for that.
Okay. So one of the things that would love to talk about is the target of the USD 5 trillion economy. But before that, let's take a couple of questions that have come in, and both the questions are based on this concept of a bad bank. So Narendra Deshmukh writes, "Sir, what is your view on formation of bad bank to take care of NPAs?" And on the similar lines, Mr. Ravi Manchanda asks a question: banks are stressed unless they dispose the NPL assets to provide liquidity and hence extend lending to customers. What are your views on discussion around the bad bank? Will it work?
So I feel the fundamental issue about bad bank is not so much about the creation of the bad bank. That's an administrative decision. Today, there is a bad bank in every bank. If we consolidate it in one place, that's just an aggregation and a new management to look after with a more focus on bad banks. So that, I think, is a smaller issue. The issue is, if you take the bad bank out of every bank, will they get onto a path that will not create another bad bank in the near, medium, long term? How do we ensure that? If we don't change anything else and only pull the bad bank out, all you do is you start them at a zero score of NPLs, and then give them the next 25 years to build it back again. What do we do to change that from recurring is the bigger question, not so much the creation of the bad bank.
Yes. Yeah. And as long as you're giving loans, there will be something will fall through, and there will be some bad loans created, and that's a risk that we have to always take. But I think their question is more on the fact that the banks are burdened with these NPAs. So can we move them off the balance sheet and such that they have a cleaner balance sheet and they have a lot more money to kind of lend to the industry?
So my view, KK, on that is very clear. If the only reason to create the bad bank is to have more room to give credit exposure, but as recklessly or as carelessly as before, then it's not a good idea. If together with removing the bad bank and creating a new bad bank, banks are allowed to have more liquidity to service the needs of the society and the businesses, but they can do that responsibly, like some private banks have done, like some foreign banks have done, then clearly that is for the right reason, removing that burden. Otherwise, you take the burden off them and you give them another cowboy approach to go and do the same thing, even with more abandon than they were doing before. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, true. Yeah, there is. I think it has to be very well balanced. I think policy has to come out. Anyway, we'll see how that moves about. We have some other people who have actually created this concept of a bad bank, and we will be talking to them sometime. I think next week. Narendra and Ravi, thank you very much for excellent questions.
So actually, KK, if I could take another minute on this. So for Narendra and Ravi, what I'm hearing from the ministry is that actually there is a very clear plan to create an accountability on the banks that are allowed to remove their bad book into this big bad bank, in terms of their ROEs, in terms of their share market cap, etc. And I think if those accountabilities are not only well crafted but also well enforced, then clearly there is a huge merit on that basis for the bad bank.
Sure. Okay. Thanks, Ravi and Narendra. Ladies and gentlemen, I look forward to more questions as we move on. Like I said, I'll be winding up the show a little early, so please send in your questions a little early. So let's look at the 5 trillion economy, the target, Mr. Bindra. So achieving the vision of India being a 5 trillion US dollar economy is contingent on having a strong financial sector. Of that, there is no doubt. What should the FM and her team do to make this sector competitive and ready for that surge in the growth?
So I think we partly addressed it. Creating more supply of deep-pocketed players in the banking sector is one important element. I think deepening the debt markets is another strong component. We still remain the only country of our size or any big size which has a debt market which is much smaller than the equity market. That's an anomaly, and that needs to be changed. I think clearly the whole IBC process, which has already been put into practice, needs to become more efficient, both in terms of being time bound and not being able to just to be more effective in all the ways that is required, which means larger infrastructure around the court system, etc. And I feel that if you can create the supply side, you can create depth in the debt market, and you can sort of have a resolution process which is more timely then it will put the right kind of discipline and pressure on the borrowers as well, which has been missing for a very long time in the market. Then I think you have a combination of creating a very stable financial market, which is really what is required for GDPs to grow and for economic size to double and treble. You need a strong and a stable financial system. And I think these would be the steps to be taken. So the good news is that I think steps have at least been put into plan, if not into action yet. So we are doing, I think we're talking the right direction, the right trajectory. Now it's a question of how well it is implemented and how quickly.
Okay. Just a pointer to that answer that you did explanation. You talked about the debt and equity ratio. You said it is compared to some other advanced countries. Perhaps it is it's very skewed. Could you explain that a little bit more?
So if you look at any of the large markets around the world, including even in Asia, so our equity market cap is, we know what it is, a little over $2 trillion now. The debt market is 3 or 4 times larger than the equity market. And this is the bond debt market, not the banking debt market. And it has also got far more depth in terms of tenor. So India, beyond a 3-year, it becomes a very shallow market. It's only available to the AAA names. And beyond 5-7 years, even AAA names, there isn't depth for AAA names. Because India has grown on a bilateral borrowing through banks rather than through the bond and capital markets, debt capital markets. And I think that is where the challenge is.
Okay. So let's see if I have some more questions. Okay. Tiag from Chennai says, bolder measures by government to raise funds for stimulus is ongoing. Will the government do the big ticket privatization and disinvestment anytime soon, or maybe this budget?
I think there is no choice. They are going to have to do. It's just how much will they do? That is the question, and how quickly. But I think there are already a few transactions that are right on the boiling pot right now as we speak, and they'll probably get announced and discussed at the budget as well. But yes, no, it is going to happen. It is going to happen. I don't think so. The government has many resources to ignore that, and I think they are going to privatize railway land. They're going to privatize other areas as well. So railways may not get privatized, but railway stations are being looked at on a PPP partnership. We've already seen that happen with airports, and we've seen it happen with the seaports. So I think there is going to be more movement in that direction.
Yeah. I think perhaps the requirement of funds will be so high if you have a once in a century budget, that you have to look at some other very bold measures, and this could be what Mr. Bindra spoke about. Could be a solution to that. So let's hear a question. Harish Prabhu would like to ask you a direct question. So Harish, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask the question.
Good evening, Jaspal.
Hi, Harish.
Yeah, so the unlike anything in the past 100 years budget, fathom a nil income tax, direct tax, and move to a transaction banking tax. The reason why I'm asking you is that many theorists, as well as accomplished economists like Dr. Swami, right, Subramaniam Swami, have been banding this theory since long. And also to a large extent, that's the panacea to, solving the demand side, problems that we have been having for a long time. So, and people are sort of betting on, and now if I correlate the stock market, which has gone up, right, significantly, which obviously is a discounting of the future earnings, which, takes into account the what do you call the growth of the economy and reflecting in the in the health of the companies, right, or the profits of the companies. So are they fathoming and unless demand side economics does get resolved in a big way, how do these numbers really stack up? And is there any fiscal room to do big bang things uh, other than this thing? Or just wanted your view.
Yeah, no, Harish, I think there's no easy answer, because as you understand, uh, the challenge the government has is, on the one hand, they want to move on a lot of fronts. Some of them were clearly from a pure political thing, like 370 in the Ram Mandir, and these were just things they believed in and they thought was righteous, and we have moved on those. And then there are a lot of things which are economic, including this whole farm bill thing, and there are other issues like this that are going to be involving more. Purely on the tax system, I don't think so. There is a big, honestly, there's a big debate on the tax system being right or wrong, um, in terms of abolishing income tax versus imposing a transaction tax. I think there are ways, there will be people who will complain about that as well. Uh, you know, it's, and, everybody has an opinion, etc. But the real thing is that for the government, it's not just an economic decision. Today, the rural farmer feels special because he's exempt from tax. If they make the whole country, they take away the special status of the rural vote bank. That is a bigger challenge for the government than actually doing the right thing. So it's a far more convoluted thing than, because I think the way Dr. Swami addresses it, you can't argue with that, because what he says is that the cost of collecting the tax is probably as much as the tax collected itself. So why do we need it? And instead we can have a transaction tax. The GST has proven to be correct. Why can't we just do it? There's no leakage possible there, etc., etc. And you pay as you spend. So the rich get taxed, the haves get taxed more appropriately, etc. But the problem is not just economic. It's always for the government a little bit more than that. And that is what, so if they are fighting a battle of doing farm and land reforms, for them to try to do the tax at the same time may be just too much to chew. So that is, I think, the balance they will have to find. The government will have to figure it out. But in the long run, if we took a 10, 15-year view, I think given that the tax base is so small, and however well they try to enforce and widen it over a period of time, it will still be a small percentage. It may not be as low as it is today. It might be 2 times that, but even 2 times that will be less than, it will still be a small double-digit number. So I think, at some stage we should look forward to that. But Harish, unfortunately, may not happen in your and mine working life.
But it's a very good subject matter of debate, I guess, and
Yes,
discussion.
it is. It is,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Thank you for
Thank you,
your
Harish.
Thank you.
Of course, Harish.
Thank you. So since we touched the tax topic, so since we touched the tax topic, and any budget is all about taxes. Everyone looks forward. Are there any more taxes that I have to pay? So it's always been about taxes. Though the last couple of years, tax has not been the focus. So so what kind of tax reforms, Mr. Bindra, are you expecting so that the consumers have more money in pocket to create that demand that is so lacking, and industries and use of doing business for the industries?
Yes, so it's very difficult to be specific, because there is a wish list across from many segments as to what they would like. But I think for us the best way to say it is that if the budget is tax friendly, which creates more disposable income in the hand of the taxpayer, then that is a positive. Um, how they bring about that extra disposable income, there are just so many ways you can bell the cat. That is going to be an impossible task to judge where they are headed. But we do hope that at the end of the budget speech, we all come away saying that, if the government can't give stimuli, at least they can leave a little bit more of what we are earning ourselves with us, rather than taking it away to themselves. And I think, like I said, there are many ways they can achieve that outcome. So if they can keep the markets buoyant, if they can keep give us some concession on the tax one way or the other, and they can give confidence and comfort that the investment flow will only be more encouraged than less encouraged. I think that combination, than just the tax alone, I think that package will be what the market is looking for.
Okay, so that brings us to the often the government has been criticized. Since July, August, supply side measures can't do much to revive the growth in the short run. So the question will be, what should be done to revive revive the demand side? What can be done?
So actually, KK, if we see the last quarter, the demand side is already showing very good signs of strong momentum now. And so you see auto sales, you see realty sales even, which is probably the most affected sector in December, had a record sale month across India. The best, of course, evidence is the GST. We've had the record collection of GST at 1.15 lakh crores, which is fantastic, even compared to pre-COVID time. So I think the momentum is there. Now the government mustn't just spoil the momentum. If they can help it lightly, they should help it lightly. But if they can help it, give it a strong push, that of course will be more welcome. So maybe on that high note, if we can sign off, KK.
Okay, you want to go?
I have to rush for something. Yeah.
Okay. Sure, sir. So I'm sorry, Tyag wanted to ask a question. Tyag, I'm sorry.
If there's a quick one, I can answer it in a minute if there is something.
A quick one. Mr. Bindra ji, very good evening, and thank you so much. It's a one-time budget in the century, as you said. My quick question: if you're in the driving seat, let's say as a finance secretary, whatever, or in the driving seat, what is your wish list and recommendations to boost the economy and the growth of the GDP? That's it.
So Tyag, firstly, the one time in a generation or one time in a century, whatever budget that is being promised is not my view. It is the finance minister has suggested that. What we can do to achieve that is really, I think it has to be very bold, rather than sort of trying to address it on the multiple things we talked about, the various pillars it has to meet. But I think it should be a bold one, and it should be a booster. It should be bold. It should be a booster. I think this is not about about just balancing the books of the government, which is what most budgets are. They try to do some benefits to some select segments, and then try to find ways to cover up those. How do they meet those gaps which get created by those segments? So I think this one must be bold. It should come, even if it comes at the cost of a slightly larger than comfortable deficit. We should go for that, because the justification and the basis for that is very clear. It is also what all the other large global economies are doing, including the very big ones like Japan and the UK and US, etc. So I think if there was a time to do it, now is a good time. The government still has a very comfortable more than 3.5 years left before they have to go back to the vote bank. So whichever way you look at it, it is the right time to be coming out with something really bold. And I do hope that it's if we can give a commentary at the end of the budget that it was a bold and economically friendly budget, I think that would be the win of one, because the last 20-year budgets haven't been so.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We will definitely invite you after the budget is out, Mr. Bindra. Tell us, is it the bold one or not? So with that, I would like to thank you, Mr. Bindra. You said you have to go.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You have another commitment. Thank you very much for coming. So ladies and gentlemen, sorry, we have to, like I said in the start of the program, that we have to wind up the show early because our guest, Mr. Bindra, has some other commitments. So it was an interesting discussion, and we look forward to that budget. We will have this budget discussions as we keep moving in, and we'll also look at some of the points when the budget is actually out. So that also we could look forward to your participation in those things. So with that, I would like to thank you for being with us and trying to understand what is this concept of budget, which the FMS said that it is going to be a once in a century budget. So will it be or will it not be? Days will, as we unfold, as the budget comes out, we will come to know. Till then, thank you very much for your participation, and look forward to meeting you all in the next week on Wednesday. Thank you. Bye-bye and good evening.